Hello folks, and welcome to our first lecture over oral interpretation. In this class we are going to be focusing on a unique form of communication which tends to overlap with English, public speaking, and theatre or acting. So, although this is technically a communication class, the many overlapping elements come from these three disciplines, yet it also remains very distinct. Many of you may have experience in one or all three of these subjects, but this course is unique in that it focuses on storytelling and narrating as a means of communicating. What I will cover in this first lecture is a basic understanding of oral interpretation of literature, the nature and the three basic elements of oral interpretation. To begin, let us first go over some of the basics of this subject. The focus of this course is a performance of literature in three main elements: through analysis, by message, with performance. And we will cover these three elements in more detail towards the end of this lecture. One of the main components to understand under this subject is the nature of play, or the act of playing out your words and speech. The idea of play focuses greatly on creativity, that is, the use of your imagination to produce ideas and works. Play and creativity go hand in hand and allow us to understand who we are and how to communicate. For instance, if you think about children, you can enter any preschool or kindergarten class and see the play and creativity all over the environment. The walls are filled with creative artworks, the children are engaged in forms of play and acting out their imaginations. In fact, play and creativity is the main educational component for children to learn about themselves and the world. As we get older, something interesting begins to happen. We begin to build up barriers to our creativity and play, becoming more self-critical and judging ourselves to the point that we start to hinder our play and creativity. Now certainly we cannot practice these in the same manner as children as we mature, but we can still maintain the practice and mature it as we get older. For example, when we have children of our own, we often use play and creativity to teach them lessons. We read them bedtime stories, we sit and help them create works, and so on. I think what we need to learn as adults is to understand that we have built up barriers to our play and creative sides, and we should find ways to break them down to improve our creativity. This class is meant to help aid you in this practice. But we are not just focused on play and creativity, we are also focused on the performance of literature. As we engage in our creative sides, we also have to be willing to embarrass ourselves a bit and accept the judgments of ourselves and others. There is an element of humor, or as the author of your text puts it, silliness. You have to allow your pride or ego to be placed to the side in order to be creative and have fun with the content. Performance entails the performer to be receptive of feedback and critique from others, which in turn will allow the performer to be freer to mess up, be embarrassed, and perform. We are focused on performing literature, which gives our creativity a great starting point. What we have to be willing and focused on is performing our literature pieces in a way that is successful and engaging to our audience. A person can engage in play and creativity, but display a poor performance of the literature. All three elements have to come together to be successful. Now that we have a basic understanding of oral interpretation, let us move on to the nature of it. Oral interpretation is technically a form of public speaking, but it entails interpreting pieces of literature rather than focusing on a specific subject or topic. Where speeches tend to focus on direct messages to either inform or persuade using some specific organizational style for delivery, oral interpretation focuses on the arrangement and performance of a literature piece to convey ideas. It also differs from theatre in that theatre places emphasis on the spectacle of performance such as costumes, stage, scenery, lighting, and props. Actors tend to memorize scripts and focus themselves on a single character where there is an on-stage presence, in which they interact with other actors. Oral interpretation differs in that there is no focus on spectacles such as costumes, props, or scenery. Speakers do not often memorize a performance but use the script as a reference, and they often play more than just one character as they narrate. As mentioned above, there is also an emphasis on play, meaning, the performer is using a combination of voice and body language to bring a message to life. This is how feelings and emotions are expressed during an oral narration, where the voice and body are used as the amplifiers. You can observe a few examples of this by way of different professions. For example, lawyers use oral narration and play to communicate emotions and feelings. Pastors and preachers use oral narration and play to communicate messages from biblical stories. And parents use narration and play to communicate life lessons and educational material. However, when we use oral interpretation, it must always be done ethically. Now, ethics is technically a subject of philosophy, but it crosses over into communication because communication, as a form of power and influence, can be used both for ethical and unethical purposes. We can use oral narration and interpretation to teach and influence moral or immoral ideas. In the field of communication, we refer to this as communication ethics, which deals with the process of negotiating and reflecting on our own actions as to what we believe to be right or wrong. Although we do not have the time to dive into what is ethical and unethical on every topic, it is important to understand that it is the responsibility of the performer to determine it for themselves in relation to their audience. Keep in mind, what may be ethical in your own mind may not be ethical to another person, but some things are accepted as universally unethical or immoral. Lastly, we will cover the three elements of oral interpretation: analysis, message, and performance. Another way to understand these three elements is 3 steps in oral interpretation. First, we have analysis. In the subject of English, you are often taught how to analyze certain elements such as relevant themes, plots, characterizations, writing styles, and discerning messages. In oral interpretation and narration, you are analyzing literature for the sole purpose of performing it. You are analyzing the denotative and connotative meanings, the relationships among the characters, and finding common themes and ideas you want to communicate in performance. The second element or step is the message itself. After analyzing, you are searching for the universal theme or overall lesson. The performance is not just for entertainment, but the performance aids in the goal of communicating the message. The element of the message will often be communicated in the introduction portion of your performance, which we will cover in a later lecture. Your audience has to know what they are focusing on. The communication of your message will give them the application and goal of your interpretation performance. Third, is the performance itself. This will be the use of your voice and body language to bring life to your chosen literature piece. You as the performer will use various elements of your vocalics such as volume, pitch, fluctuation, vocal variety, while using your body language such as facial expressions, posture, gestures, eye movements and so on. The use of these vocalics and body language will influence the context, meaning, feelings, and emotions of your audience. All 3 of these elements, or steps, must be interpreted for the interpretation to be understood. One of the most important things for motivating you in this class is to have a goal you want to accomplish. Think of the main reason you would want to take this class and how it can aid you in either your private or personal life. I reflect on myself, and I want to be able to tell great stories to my 4 children. I want them to understand not only the lesson in the stories, I want them to enjoy the story by way of my performance as I share it with them. You should also choose a similar goal for yourselves as a means of motivating you during this course. And with that, we will end our first lecture. We have gone over some of the basic understanding of performance literature, the nature of oral interpretation, and lastly the 3 main elements and steps. Remember, it is not just about the ability to analyze and communicate a message, it is about being able to do so in an effective and ethical manner.